You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is February 7th, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today, we're going to have a special one on parents' rights, and we're going to get to that along with the specific topics we're going to be talking about is can government hide information from parents about their kids? We're going to talk about where do a parent's rights end and a grandparent's rights begin. And then in our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we're going to talk about woke kindergarten that's happening in California right now. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. So we have a special guest today. We have David DeLugas of ParentsUSA, and he is a returning guest. And if you want to find out what rang his Liberty Bell initially, you have to go check out some of our earlier shows to hear a little more about his background. But, he's doing great work defending parents' rights in the courts. So really good organization. And in fact, James, let me bring up his page real quick before I introduce the rest of the panel. This is the ParentsUSA webpage. So you can go here, parentsusa.org. to check that out, and you can find out a little bit more what it's about. And they even have an NBA player on their staff now. Elevated.
A former NBA player.
There you go. So somebody to give you an assist there in the court, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So anyway, and just as a disclaimer too, I am a member. So a dues paying member, I guess you'd call it, or whatever. So it's a great organization. So, but anyways, the rest of our panel on our lower right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And on our lower left-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California.
Yeah, hungry eagle.
A hungry pilot.
Sorry, you guys, we're going to go an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I'm stuck.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Not maybe not the show, but everything all included.
Okay. Well, I'm going to cut you off, Tim, so that we don't go 2 hours here. Okay. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So what we've been doing at the beginning of these shows is we start out with a Liberty quote. We've been doing that for the last few months. And this time I wanted to find something on parents' rights, because that's essentially what this podcast is going to be focused on. And so I kind of was looking far and wide, and it's a lot harder to find a quote from sort of a liberty-oriented person than you'd think. I guess a lot of people, they overlook that category maybe, and so you don't see it pop up as many places. But what I did find is a quote, and Jane, maybe there you go, from this gentleman called Wilton Simpson, and he is the president of the Florida Senate. And he was involved with the Parents' Bill of Rights in Florida on education that they did a couple of years ago. And he had this interesting thing to say, which I thought was just spot on for our episode. He said at the time, parents have a fundamental right to make decisions regarding the upbringing of their children, and schools should not be keeping important information from parents. Children belong to families, not the state. Parents are not the enemy. They are the child's first and best advocate. So I thought that was really, kind of spot on with what we're going to be talking about. Did you guys want to just comment at all on what he said before we get moving on?
Yeah. If you don't mind me throwing this out there, because those who even question the fundamental constitutional right of parents and what that means and what it doesn't mean, by the way, are going to attack this statement by pointing to all the parents who are inadequate, the parents who abuse their children, hurt their children, kill their children, because those parents unfortunately do exist. So when anybody makes a statement such as parents are the child's first and best advocate, clearly he intends to say, by and large, mostly, almost every parent is a child's best and first and best advocate, not intending to include within that the drug using horribly awful parents. So when we talk about parents making decisions for their children, we are not including horrible parents. Those parents, by definition, do not have the same constitutional rights, because the appellate courts all the way up to the Supreme Court begins under the premise of, we're talking about fit parents who do not harm their child. If you harm your child, then you are making a decision not protected by the Constitution. So let's just clear that up.
Okay.
Well, I guess all rights come with responsibilities also. So if we have rights as parents, it's also come with a certain amount of responsibility to be fit and good parents.
Well, I can parse it out. The answer is yes to be fit, but the defining line between when parents have rights and when parents don't is when they harm their child. If your decision is harmful, and keep in mind, that doesn't mean that your decision's not the best decision. In fact, across the country, there's been a lot of discussion, debate, argument, shouting about the school choice. I'd like to reframe it as parents' choice or educational options. And then if this money is coming to a parent, it's affordable education options, meaning they actually have some choices to make because they can afford to make choices. Most people don't have that liberty, don't have that choice to make because they don't have the funds to send their child elsewhere. So, but within that context, often it immediately goes to, well, that's not what's best for the child. Well, you know what? Maybe what's best for the child is designer clothes, nice hairdo, a beautiful car, the best medical care the country offers, best nutrition purchased at the best grocery stores. Well, that's not reality. The reality is that none of us are required as parents to do what's best. We're required to do what's not harmful. And your rights as a parent begin when you're fit and you're not hurting your child. And we hope and encourage, and we should educate, and we should provide safety nets and systems to allow parents to do better, inching toward what's considered best. But keep in mind, best according to whom? Nobody but the parents has the right to decide what's best. So when educators say idiotic things such as, well, how does a parent without a college degree or not even a high school degree, how are they able to make the best education decision for the child? The answer is they don't have to make the best. All they have to do is not make a decision that's hurtful to the child. Well, that child would do so much better at a different school or in this particular program, and the parents are too ignorant to make that decision. You know, again, the rights of a parent to decide extends to making less than the perfect decision. It's simply don't hurt your child. So we as a society need to decide. If you have the right, then everybody needs to just clam up, shut up, leave it alone, and say, we hope they do the best they can. And if they don't, that's just how it's going to be, because our society doesn't require, let's make sure your child gets into the best athletic program, the best dance program, that, gets the best medical care and dental care. That's not society's role. That's not government's place. There's a limited role of government from the Constitution down, and that it means we need to quit using government as a force to make parents do something that other people have decided they need to do for those parents, those children. You decide for your child and let every other parent decide for their own child. End of story. I don't know if I said that forcefully enough for those in the back of the room, but believe it or not, although I did not mix legalese into that, that literally is what the fundamental constitutional rights of parents includes.
Yeah. And that is one thing too, as far as this is where it gets a little hairy, is when people start subjectively saying what is harm too. That can kind of go, a little bit sideways. But Tim, I was going to jump onto one thing real quick, but I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add or not. So I'm guessing no. Well, I'll let you jump in later.
Sustenance comes first.
Yeah, sustenance came first there. No, I think we're good. I think we can go ahead on past the quote.
Awesome. Okay, so there was one point in what he said that I think is one of the key things, and I'm going to do something we don't usually do. I'm going to bring up a quote from somebody else who I think characterizes the other side of this. And so one of the lines that this guy said, this Wilton Simpson, he said, "Children belong to families, not the state." And now, if there's a quote here that I want to bring up, and it's we actually have a video clip. So it's our favorite president, and it's something that he's saying. So let me bring this up real quick.
Jason, can you give me 2 seconds?
Sure.
Even that quote is inaccurate. Children don't belong to families; they belong to parents. And it's up to the parents to decide how much to involve and include grandparents, cousins, uncles, and other members of their family. So unless that particular politician means by family means the parents and the children, that's the definition of family, that would be accurate. But the minute you include anybody else beside the parents and the children, it's inaccurate.
And by the way, that point will be really important when we get to our second topic later on in the show. But let me bring up that video clip because it's our favorite commander in chief. I guess he's a commander. Let's bring up this quick snippet of what his thoughts are on children. James, can you bring up?
There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.
Yeah, I remember that. I absolutely remember that. I was asked to comment on that. I read everything I could read about the entire speech, by the way. And it's an awful, inaccurate, horrible representation. I don't care who says it. It's just not correct. It is a grab of power away from parents that the government does not have.
Mm-hmm. And the thing I think that's kind of bad about it too is that it sounds kind of nice. I mean, you hear what he's saying, and a lot of people might say, "Oh, that sounds nice. We need to be worried about everybody's kids." But when, like you said, when we're really starting to think about what that means, it is putting a severe strain on the parent-child relationship when you start saying everybody has a stake in that relationship. So,
I guess, Jason, I will have to take issue with the word sounding kind of nice. I mean, maybe it sounds nice if you're living in China, where the kids belong to the state. Maybe you're right, but I don't think that sounds nice in America. That sounds like you're living in some socialist country where the state is involved in every aspect of your life, including how to parent your child. So no, it does not sound nice. I'll take issue with that, brother.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm just thinking of what it might sound like to somebody who would have voted for Biden and given him the benefit of
Jason, you make an excellent point that the statement is made as, again, politicians on both sides of the aisle, every realm of the political world, and anybody in debate likes to say things that could be heard as, well, isn't that nice? You know, we have to be supportive of families, supportive of children. We have to help people along. Yes, that's not a bad sentiment. I would support that idea. It's how you implement it and what power you're taking from the parents, what money you're taking from everybody, and then giving back to government to implement some program that is avoiding taking from parents the decisions to make, the consequences of those. I mean, it's just the real life out there. And ParentsUSA, we have we're gonna get more emails, but we get emails every day from parents around the country. And our help request, please don't call, because we cannot talk to you until we've decided to get involved, create an attorney-client relationship. But we'll review documents and your story if you email at help@ParentsUSA.org. You don't need to join. You don't need to donate, although, of course, that's how we support our staff so that we can help. But we get these requests all the time, whether it's DFACS, which, again, Child Protective Services, Department of Family and Children Services, perform an important role if what they're doing is rescuing children from being harmed. And by the way, the harm, courts have already defined it. It's significant physical harm. That doesn't mean a spanking or a kid skinned his knee or bumped his head because his parents didn't insist on elbow pads and a helmet when he rode his bike. Now we're going to take the kid away from his parents. It means something significant physically, or it means long-term emotional harm, meaning something psychological, psychiatric that's being imposed on the child by virtue of what the parents are allowing to happen to the child, not just the child sad, depressed, upset, worried, bothered, because all human beings go through that. It is not grounds for state interference or state intervention, or worse, state taking children away from their families, their parents, and their siblings, because one of the things our society is very poor about doing is not weighing and balancing the harm that government action causes in the belief that the government action is going to be helpful. And the only time government should intervene is, one, if they have the right under the Constitution to intervene, and secondly is if their intervention does more good than the harm the government's intervention causes. And I can assure you, from both the parents who contact us and the court cases that we've seen and cases we're involved in, government doesn't wait, especially if we get to grandparent visitation. By the way, grandparents have no rights under the Constitution. Grandparents have been given by legislatures who overreach the ability to petition a court to ask for grandparent visit. Anyway, that's second topic.
Save that for that topic.
Okay.
That's one.
But they're all related to this concept of government thinking it solves problems, government causes problems. Hey, at least as a society, we should insist government not cause more problems in trying to do something they think they're helping, when on balance, they're actually making it worse overall.
Yeah.
Well, that is so true. I mean, you could look. I mean, to me, the most obvious example of the government intending to do great and doing and ended up doing great harm is the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, which started in 1965 and is still ongoing today, but that have done nothing but destroy Black families in the United States of America. So the government always do harm, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know. That's probably a topic for another show. But how we stop them from doing harm, to me, is a big issue that we always face.
Well, Reason.com, and I'm not affiliated or associated with them, but I think today they had an article on most Americans are dissatisfied with their political leaders, from local and county government, state government, all the way up through the federal government to the president. And yet they keep voting the same people back into office. I mean, we just have to just not vote for the incumbent a lot of the time, most of the time. Not because we need term limits. I'm against term limits, because all that does is tell somebody, it's like the person who wins the prize and they get to run through a grocery store or department store and get everything they can collect within 5 minutes. That's what we'd be telling politicians. Hey, you're only going to be here 6 years. Steal and cheat and set up something so the minute we kick you out, you've set yourself up for life. That's what we would be telling them. And that's a terrible message. So I'm not in favor of term limits for that reason and that reason alone. But the idea of maybe we should have, if you go to a Home Depot, there's a sign on the store, apply for a job, but be prepared to take a drug test. Well, I wouldn't mind politicians, elected leaders having drug tests, but you know what they should have? Audits of their financial affairs every year or 2 years or randomly, so that we can find out how they came into office with what wealth and how are they getting wealthier while in office.
Yeah. Especially with all that crazy insider trading. But of course, that's a different topic altogether.
Yes. We should save that one for a show, definitely. Yes.
Exactly.
Start making a list, Tim. You're not talking, so make a list of all these topics we need to cover in future shows.
I'll get right on it.
Okay.
Okay. So let's jump to the first topic. So So one of the big issues with that's, I guess, scaring the bejesus out of a lot of parents around the country is that schools are literally starting to set up policies where they've decided there's some things that are happening with a student at school that they just won't tell the parent about, which, it seems absolutely insane. And in this case, Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual. In this case, it has mainly to do with students who are expressing maybe gender confusion or other issues like that at school, where they may talk to a counselor, and suddenly that the school is deciding that they're setting up policies to say, hey, we think maybe the parent is the enemy, kind of like what was in that first quote, parents aren't the enemy. Well, maybe the school is kind of thinking they are. And so we're not going to tell the parent because we're concerned that the parent won't have a view that we like on this subject potentially. So we're just not going to tell them. And this isn't, this particular case and the one I think that we'll be talking about with David here is happening in Maryland, but it's also happening all around the country too. There was a case in California here where, that's going on, and a judge blocked the school district from being able to notify the parents if the children are deciding they want to change their pronouns in school. This is, apparently happening all over the country. This particular article talks about, I think, it happening in Virginia and other places as well, too. But we do have a video clip, and we got it from this Goldwater Institute, and the woman's name is Amber Levine, and she is also in Maine, and she is going through something very similar. And so I took this video snippet from Goldwater and I edited it down just a little bit to, I thought, what the core issue was. And so, James, maybe you could play KOL clip 2, because this will really help to understand how the parent maybe sees what's happening in this situation.
Just always been able to come to me and talk to me about things. At the end of her 7th grade year, she began talking with a school social worker, but they did transfer her to this other social worker who I had never met, and he never reached out to me to tell me that he was going to be working with my kiddo. And everything about it felt like the goal was to remove me from any sort of conversation surrounding my daughter's mental health. One day, family affair, we were cleaning my daughter's bedroom and we discovered a breast binder in her bedroom. And so I had a conversation with her and asked her where it came from. She finally came out and told me that the school had given it to her, and more precisely, the school social worker. It hurt as a mom to know that she was keeping a secret, but I think it hurt even more to know that adults were encouraging her to keep these secrets. It really makes you wonder what other things are occurring in your schools. It really makes you question everything.
So that's just a little snippet, and if you're interested in that, you can go and check out the Goldwater Institute's YouTube page if you want to hear more about her story. But this sounds like a story that might be related to some of the stuff that you're seeing, David. And so let me bring up your amicus brief, and if you want to tell us a little bit about the case that you're working on, maybe and maybe what parents are experiencing there.
Well, thank you for showing what we filed at, by the way, great expense. The thing about the U.S. Supreme Court, a little old school, even though we can e-file the brief, we actually have to send it to a legal printer, and it costs $2,700 just to get it formatted, printed, and 45 copies of this small booklet created and distributed to the justices of the Supreme Court, the clerk, and then all the counsel for the petitioners and the respondents. So this case is not a case in which we are representing the parents or the school district. Of course, we're not. We are representing the interests of parents nationally and adding our point of view and being what are called friends of the court. And the Latin expression is amicus curiae. And what the purpose of an amicus curiae is to provide appellate courts, in this case, the U.S. Supreme Court, with either legal arguments or research or data or arguments that perhaps the petitioners, the parents in this case, who are going anonymously, using a pseudonym because they're concerned about retaliation against their children who are students at the school if the school learns who the parents are that are challenging the gender identity policy. Now, that's in this particular case. And the gender identity policy, and as you described it, Jason, for what are the reasons the school would adopt a policy? In the gender identity policy, the school board articulates that they want to create a certain environment for all of their students so that all of their students feel safe and comfortable at school, certainly. And that if the school learns from a student that the student may not be supported by the family at home, their parents, or that the student is concerned about whether or not they will be supported by the parents when it comes to their gender confusion, gender identity, gender decisions, whether or not encouraged or discouraged by any individual school teacher or staff or administrator, as the parent in Maine in your clip discussed, although that's a reality or concern all parents must have legitimately because it does occur. But the school board purports to say, hey, we care that our students feel comfortable and safe at school. So when it comes to gender, we will tell the teachers and all staff they are not allowed to communicate with the parents in the name that they are addressing the student at school, if different from the name that parents were that enrolled the child at school, or otherwise reveal this gender issue to the parents. Now, again, similar to President Biden's talk about they're all our children, perhaps the intentions of somebody who began this idea of a policy was so that students feel safe and secure at school and they don't have to deal with certain things at home. But that's absurd for these reasons. And these are some of the arguments. And I understand you captured from the amicus brief some of the arguments, but among them are the state of Maryland requires by law parents send their kids to school. There are 4 arguments that we put forth that candidly the petitioners, the lawyers representing the parents didn't make that argument. But here's one of the ones that's most important to me. How do you, as a school, and this is a rhetorical question, by the way, means the answer is you don't. How does a school trust that what the student is telling the school teacher and staff is truthful? Because as I wrote in this brief, and I hope there's some chucklers, people watching this who laugh, I wrote in quotes, "The dog ate my homework," says students throughout the history of schools. Because students will tell teachers anything to get out of being in trouble. They'll tell teachers and others anything to be more accepted by their peers and by their teachers. They'll tell teachers just about anything if they think it'll curry favor with a teacher. So
hold on. David, let me jump in real quick. I just wanted to say we're at the end of our time for our public access audience. But if you want to catch the rest of this conversation, jump over to YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, or Rumble, and you can catch the rest of this conversations and many others. So sorry, back to the show.
Okay. Well, again, they're basing this 100% on what the student says may be the ramifications at home. And I took that particular absurd argument or a policy position of the school board and turned it back on them. And in the amicus brief ParentsUSA filed with the U.S. Supreme Court, I created hypothetical guidelines, not for gender identity, but for illicit drug use. Well, my parents would be really upset if they found out I was smoking pot at school or shooting up heroin at school. So now that you caught me at school using drugs, please don't tell my parents. They will be really upset. I might even have my phone or car taken away, or I might get spanked. And keep in mind, by the way, this policy doesn't apply only for high schoolers. This is middle school. This is all the students in the entire school system of that particular county. So the point I'm making to the U.S. Supreme Court is if it was drug use that we were hiding from the parents, would we even be thinking that that's okay? How about, I'm flunking. I'm not passing. I'm going to be held back a grade. I didn't turn in any projects or homework. Don't tell my parents. They're going to be really upset with me. are we still not telling the parents? How about if it's, I had sex with Coach Jones, or I was raped in the bathroom. I am so ashamed and embarrassed. I don't want my parents to know this. Well, we're going to hide it from the parents because you need to be comfortable and not feel that way. So, yeah, thank you. It's actually the last argument. So, but it's premised on the notion that the student is being honest. They don't even check with the parent. What if they checked with the parents and the parents went, hey, I'm a little shocked and surprised to learn this information about gender or any of the other topics. But you know what? I love my child. I support my child. I back my child. Thank you for letting me know my child, your student, but my child, we're going to confer as a family. We're going to do therapy, not conversion therapy. We're not going to make them do, we're just going to, try to help find out. We're going to check with this endocrinologist about drug therapies, what's appropriate and at what age, what dosages, may or may not consider. It's up to the parents and the child to figure that out, not the school. So one of the arguments I make is they're just premising this on, well, of course, students always tell us the truth. So we're going to act in accordance with whatever the student tells us. That's one of the arguments I made. And another argument I made had to do with the idea that the school is teaching and role modeling deceit, deception to students and the parents. They're telling students, young children up through high school, it's okay to lie if it's a good enough reason. We're going to teach these young people to be deceitful, and we're going to help them do it. And then we're going to expect them to go into society and be honest, upstanding citizens who are productive and capable of being self-reliant. We're teaching them something that psychology, and I provided links to a number of psychological studies that talk about, yes, young children often lie because they can't distinguish truth from reality. Every child grows out of that. They learn truth is important. Integrity comes along. And the long-term negative ramifications for children who don't learn that lying is not a good quality is horrifying. So schools, who are supposed to be just educating your kids, are actually undermining the correct development of the child. And nobody bothered to say, is this a good idea or not? We're educators. We're just not even going to consider the negative impact on the child. So these are the kinds of arguments that the U.S. Supreme Court should consider in deciding. And another one is this. Yes, some of the children are going to face consequences at home that they should not, or let's not call them consequences, reactions at home they should not have to face. And it's terrible. But schools in particular, teachers in particular, are what are called mandatory reporters when it comes to child abuse.
James, can you bring the visual for this one too? Because I think this is argument B.
So the state of Maryland mandates that teachers, doctors, and others in certain positions in the state are required to report to law enforcement or to the Maryland Child Protective Services if there are any indications or suspicions or concerns about a child being maltreated, abused by anybody, much less at home. But report it. That is your responsibility as a school. That's what you do if you're concerned. You don't hide information from the parents. You don't lie to the parents. So the state of Maryland, on one hand, is mandating that the school report it, and the school system itself is saying, not only are we not going to report it, we're going to actively hide it. That's contrary to Maryland law. At the same time, Maryland law requires parents, nobody else, the parents and the guardians are the only ones who can register children for school in Maryland, and they're required by law to register them for school. So the state is saying, you're required by law, compulsory education, you have to register them. You're the only ones that can. And now that you have, we got your kid and we're going to lie to you. And we're not going to follow Maryland law about mandatory reporter because we don't want to. But only about the topic of gender identity, not on any of these other topics like academic failure and sex at school and illicit drug use or being in fights and being bullied. That information will pass along to you because of course we will, but not gender identity. Why? Why is one topic more worthy or what's the, forgetting worthiness, let's use a different word. What's the distinguishing factor that allows some topics to not be withheld from parents, but this one topic to be withheld?
Well, and that was kind of the scary thing, because what we saw in Amber Levine's, anecdote that she was giving about her own case, that was an issue that she was having. Well, if they aren't telling me about this, what else aren't they telling me about? Right? Because, it's not like she's spending all her time reading over school policy. I mean, most parents don't have the bandwidth to sit there and find out every little thing about school board policy. So, yeah.
Sorry, I'm leaving out Leon and Tim from the entire conversation.
No. It's fine. No, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's okay. You got the floor.
Well, but again, that's the reason why education options is so important, so that schools have to compete for the students to enroll. Just if you think about it, community colleges, universities, trade schools, internships and apprenticeships for HVAC, welding, the U.S. military, they all compete for 17 to 22-year-olds, thereabouts, for their business, for their dollars, for their enrollment, for their registration. They compete.
The selective service notwithstanding.
Well, we don't have a current draft, but so the answer, Tim, is they all compete for what that person from 16, 17 to about 23 or 4, again, a vast majority, do something within that realm of go into the military, take an apprenticeship, take a job. They go to a community college, go to university. There are student loans available that you can pick and choose where you go to school. On a state-by-state basis, every state needs to say to parents, if you want to send your child to public school, you pick the public school that you think is best suited for your child, enroll them at that school. That school is going to get the dollars associated with your child going there. If you choose to homeschool, we're going to give you the money. Oh my gosh, what if they misuse the money? Well, let's set up something so they don't just get to pocket the money or go to their drug dealer. They actually have to do something with it. But there's a whole body of work, and I've been studying this over the last 4 or 5 years because of the work we do at ParentsUSA. Children naturally want to learn. You just cut them loose. I mean, the whole idea of the old schoolhouse, that didn't even start until the mid-1800s, and mandatory education didn't start until the 1920s or 30s. The idea was children learn. They learned by working side by side with their parents in the fields or in the business they started, or if your dad or mom happened to be a doctor or a lawyer, you apprenticed and you learned how to think and read and things. So the idea of school, public school in particular, being the only route is absurd. There are, especially because of COVID, there are micro schools, charter schools, and public schools fight with charter schools, which are also a function of government, by the way, but they fight because, oh my gosh, some of the students may decide charter schools better, or the parents of the children. So we need a robust competitive atmosphere in education so that parents who do not have the power to make a school do what they want can then say, I don't like this policy at your school. You can have that policy, but you shouldn't, by the way, and it's in the court system. And as your headline showed, some courts are saying you're not allowed to tell parents. What? That's absurd. So we can't rely on our court system or the legislature to fix our problems, people. We need to make the decision with our feet and our dollars, the same way you do in your community. If you don't like how you're treated at a restaurant, you don't go back. If you don't like the pricing at one gas station, you hunt around for a better price. Everything is about competition to get the best out of service providers. And frankly, teachers and schools are nothing more than education service providers. Important.
Well, I was just going to say that brings up an important point too, because this is the pushback that some people would give you on the other side of this, and they would, these are sort of the planner types. They would say, "Well, we have the educational knowledge to know what's best for you, and you don't know what's best for you. Therefore, we're going to make all these choices for these parents who really don't know what's in their best interest." But in the end, I mean, parents, just like with any product out there, they can see what happens to the alumni over time that go to these different schools. And that's one of the key things is outcomes of students who've been going to those schools. And that metric is going to be a powerful metric, even if you're not, don't have a bachelor's degree in education.
Well,
that mentality you just described, Jason, that's the mentality of the communist socialists, of the communists and the socialists. And we know what happened to communism and socialism all over the world. Okay. So that's the mentality that is pushing back against us.
Leon's right. Incidentally, let me note two things about what you say about the pushback. That is the pushback. But here are two things I think are extraordinarily important to observe. Nobody comes along and tells you that your 17-year-old high school senior has to go to Harvard or Duke, my alma mater, or the state university, the main campus of your state university. If your child decides they don't want to go to college, nobody says, oh, he has to go to college. That's what's best for him. Don't you know better? That's because government at some point realizes, you know what, they're going to get away from us. We can't control it. But when they control the money they take and say, we're going to set up the virtual monopoly, and unless you're wealthy enough to go to a private school and you pay for it, even though you still pay property tax or taxes in your state that are designed for the state school budget, education budget. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why the cry that school choice is racism and it's horrible, it's actually the opposite. School choice are, again, affordable education options by allowing parents of color to say the school system where I'm required to send my child based on my zip code is not doing an adequate job. My child hates going to that school. My child gets beat up at that school. There's crime at that school. There's drugs at that school. Gee, if only a guy could afford this nice private school over here, or I could move to, if I could choose a different public school district, even though not where I live. Those are all the kinds of things government needs to quit acting as if government should control these decisions of parents, but instead open up the various options. Let the consumer of education services, that is the parents, decide for the child, allocate the money, and let the schools compete. You do a better job at your school. Hey, think about it. Schools, colleges, and universities send campus recruiters to high schools. All the military branches go to schools that allow them in and try to recruit 17 and 18-year-olds to join that branch of the military. They're trying to get the business in a competitive world. We should make school systems do the same things, compete for the attendance and enrollment of the students. And that's how you signify you must be a pretty good school, or maybe you have the best football program, or maybe you have the best music program or the best dance program. And that's why people want to go there. I mean, those who follow sports know there are certain elite athletes around the country whose parents will kind of be recruited and moved to a particular elite school that happens to have an elite basketball program or football program.
And that's the beauty of the market. It's not one size fits all, right? I mean, one parent may be looking to get their kid an arts thing, and another's looking for STEM, and another's looking for...
And that's my point. It should be open marketplace where dollars and zip codes don't determine that a school has a stranglehold on your child and you can't get out of there. Although I will tell you, and some parents don't like this pushback and reality check, I keep thinking this is 2024 now. You know, what was it, 1620? A bunch of people got on an old rickety boat and went from England to the Mayflower, Plymouth Rock, without GPS and a navigation system or any way to preserve food. And then after we began colonizing and people started saying, hey, you know, I think I want to go to a different climate, or I hear there's gold in California. People got in Conestoga wagons, again, without the benefit of GPS, without the benefit of an interstate highway system, without the benefit of knowing there are jobs waiting for you when you get there, and made the move and took the risks across, hostile lands. People, if you need to move because your school system's awful for your child, move. Find a way. Get out of where you are. Don't be locked into where you are. Understand it isn't easy. Look, I'm not preaching from the ivory tower. I'm just saying If the only choice you have is send your child to a school that's going to hurt your child, hurt them emotionally, make them hate going to school, not allow them to learn up to their capacity and their potential, then you have to do something while the politicians in the state legislature take money from union representatives of the teachers, or otherwise just sit around and waste money and time and energy while they send their kids to private schools. Hey, I'm not jumping on.
David, so David, okay, I mean, I fully support your ideas about parental choice, if that's how you want to call it. But what progress are we seeing in this regard? I know Arizona had put in universal school choice, or parent choice, as you would call it, and I think Iowa did the same thing. Are we seeing progress?
Let's not. I just wanted to say, let's not dive too far into school choice, because otherwise we'll be on this topic forever. So if we can,
maybe that's another show. Tim, write that down, please. Keep it lit.
But no, we were just starting to digress, but I know we did have the grandparents issue we wanted to get to, but I did want to ask you real quick before we left this one, just two details in case anybody's interested in this. What ages is this thing affecting? Is it 6, 16? I mean, what we heard this one woman talk about was her 7th grade student. And the other thing is, if this is directed toward the Supreme Court, is it a certainty it'll get there? And if so, when?
Well, first of all, it's never certain. When you file a petition for certiorari, when you're the one petitioning, you lost in the lower court. So what happened is, as I recall, is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the U.S. Court of Appeals, affirmed a decision by the U.S. District Court, which is the trial level. So the trial level appellate court, U.S. Supreme Court. And so far, what the courts are telling the parents is, you don't have legal standing to challenge this policy, which is an absurd outcome. But the parents are hoping the U.S. Supreme Court will take the case. Again, most cases are not taken by the U.S. Supreme Court. They're overwhelmed by how many petitions are filed. The good news is, an indicator, reading tea leaves, is this. The U.S. Supreme Court did indicate that they're going to circulate the briefs on a certain date. And the county, the Montgomery County, Maryland School Board, they waived their opportunity to file a response to the petitioner's petition for writ of certiorari. I'm sorry for the legalese here. However, the U.S. Supreme Court put a docket entry, meaning they asked the school board, we want your response. That's an indication that they're going, hey, if you have some reaction or response to what the petitioner and all the amicus have filed, you need to file that document with us. And we want it by, and I think the date they asked for it was by February 15th. And then the county said, Maryland Montgomery County School Board said, oh, may we have 30 more days? It's been litigated in the U.S. District Court, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, but we need 30 more days. They're really just trying to kick the can down the road and delay the outcome. And the Supreme Court granted it, which is fairly common. So we're expecting that mid-March, we will learn if the Supreme Court of the U.S. will consider this case. If so, then they will issue an order. And in that order, they will say, we're granting the petition. And here are the issues they were asking the petitioner and the respondent, the petitioner parents, and the respondent school board to direct their arguments and citations of legal authority. And then at that point, we will again assess what the Supreme Court says. And almost certainly we're going to file another amicus brief, because all of your wonderful and generous viewers and listeners will chip in and come up with around $3,000 so we can pay the legal printer to do our next brief, which again, it's just the cost of doing business, which is another issue we could talk about all day long. Tim, write this down, is why is our legal system so expensive? Why is it so slow? Why is it so hard for our rights to actually, trickle up to the point where something's done about it? It shouldn't be like this. Why are so many rights of ours trampled on, and it's up to us, the people, to fight back? It just shouldn't be. our rights should just be honored and respected, but they're not.
I think it's because the government does way too much, so we're fighting about way too much. But that said, what do we, what happens when we wind up as parents fighting with our grandparents, I guess, over a child's thing? And that's actually one of the other things you guys are involved in. And Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual. It looks like you guys had gone to the Idaho Supreme Court, and it sounds like you guys had put in an amicus brief, and I guess you guys were successful there, is what it sounds like. And did you want to tell us a little bit about that case and maybe what kind of a precedent it sets?
Well, that was a pretty fascinating case. The Evans, the parents, lived in California. The mother, they were a married couple, and they have 3 daughters. The mother's mother, therefore the maternal grandmother, and her husband, step parent to the mother, were pretty wealthy. And this is according to the trial court order. The trial court heard all the evidence, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, and said the grandparents are out of control. They have too much. They have a lot of money. They spoil these kids rotten, and the mother and the father, trying to instill some character in their children, asked the grandmother and her husband to quit buying them so many expensive gifts, quit taking them shopping, quit undermining us. So this was literally in the trial court's order, that the grandmother would come over, and because they lived apparently not that far from Disneyland, and would tell these 3 girls, hey, let's all go to Disneyland again. And the mother would say, oh, hey, let's just all stay here and let's have a picnic in the backyard. And the grandmother would go, you girls don't want to do that, do you? You want to go with grandma to Disneyland. So that happened so often that the mother and the father made the decision that for the benefit of their children, they were going to cut back on how much time the grandmother could spend with the kids. And grandmother basically said, you can't do that, and took them to court. And the trial court ended up writing, these grandparents don't know their place, their boundaries, but even though they haven't seen the grandkids now for a couple of years, and even though the grandkids are doing great, I'm still going to order that the parents allow the grandparents to see the grandchildren as soon as the grandparents go to 6. Yes, because the trial judge obviously is clairvoyant and knows that if he orders the grandparents to go to 6 counseling sessions, and a counselor that the grandparents are paying writes a letter that says, they get it now, that'll solve everything. Right? So that's what happened. And then the parents were like, really? And filed an appeal to the intermediate court, and also included in that, can you just kick it up to the Idaho Supreme Court and bypass it as a matter of Idaho procedural law? It can be done in certain domestic cases, family cases, because delay causes harm to children, theoretically. So the Supreme Court took it, and then ParentsUSA was we heard from the parents saying, hey, would you guys consider filing an amicus brief? And after we read the trial court order and we looked at what had happened, we're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. As legally, it's awful. I mean, as a reality, factually, it was terrible, but legally, it was the Idaho statute on grandparent visitation did not include what the U.S. Supreme Court in a plurality decision in 2000 wrote, that there has to be, for the state to intervene on any issue regarding the rights of parents to make decisions for their own children, is a showing by clear and convincing evidence of physical harm, significant physical harm, long-term emotional harm. And that was not in the Idaho grandparent visitation statute or appellate court cases that tend to try to clarify what statutes really mean. So we filed an amicus brief, and we gave Supreme Court cases from other states around the country, and made argument about what the law says and doesn't say. And we'd like to think that we were fairly persuasive to the Supreme Court, because September of 2023, the Idaho Supreme Court struck as facially unconstitutional. That means that the way it's written, it can't be salvaged by an appellate court decision that interprets it. It's facially unconstitutional, and the Idaho Supreme Court Idaho legislature has to come up with a statute that actually conforms to what the Idaho Supreme Court is telling everyone the law actually says. Now, that's one case. We have a case pending right now in grandparent visitation in the Georgia Supreme Court. I suspect another one's going to hit the Georgia Supreme Court. And we get that request often because it's really, I give you just a flavor. In Florida in 2015, they revised the statute on grandparent visitation, did a pretty dang good job. I mean, other states should model legislation after Florida, because one of the threshold issues for trial courts in Florida on grandparent visitation is that the grandparents have to demonstrate, again, by clear and convincing evidence, as a prima facie, meaning a first showing, kind of like probable cause in a criminal case. The grandparents would have to show the children would be harmed in the absence of court intervention, and secondly, that it would not undermine the parents. Well, that's a really hard thing to show because here's what ends up happening. Again, a child maybe at 3 or 4 or 5 years old is told by the parents, hey, you're going to go visit grandma. And the kids are like, they don't know any better. And they go spend Saturday or a weekend or a week with grandma and grandpa. But when they're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they have activities going on. They have friends in the neighborhood. They're playing ball, they're in dance or this. And they turn to the mom or dad and say, yeah, I know I go to grandma's every other weekend or one weekend a month or however long, but I don't feel like going today. Mom and dad have a court order to tell them if they don't send the kid, they're in contempt of court. So the parents have lost the authority to turn to their child and go, yeah, I'll just call grandma and tell her you're not going to make it today. You'll see her another time. They can't do that because there's a court order. That's absurd. And yet there's no out. So Florida says you can't undermine. Now, New York, we often think of New York as well. New York's crazy. But in this case, New York, in this situation for grandparent visitation, their statute's not very good, but they have appellate decisions that say if there's animus for everybody out, animosity, if there's like not good things going on between grandparents and the parents, then we're not even going to go to let the grandparents get to the trial stage of having a hearing to decide whether it'd be harmful for the children not to see grandparents because the parents have decided we're going to curtail that interaction. So the threshold in New York is you got to get along. Don't be mean and nasty to the parents.
The absurdity of all this is, suppose there's great grandparents, in the mix. Do they get to pull rank? I mean, who ultimately has...
Actually, some states don't limit it to grandparents. They open it up to pretty much anybody, aunts, uncles, cousins, relatives at any degree, as if somehow magically across the board, if you're related by blood or marriage to kids, somehow you have a statutory, because no state and the U.S. Constitution does not confer any rights upon grandparents or relatives. It's only parents have rights. But somehow the legislatures around the country have all decided, hey, we're going to pass legislation that creates a process by which relatives can come say, allow us to be here, make the parents do what we want, judge, because doing so is better for the kids. And after all, it's your job as legislators and as courts to do what's better for the kids, which is, again, as we talked about when it comes to education, that's not the job of government. The job of government is to protect children from being hurt. And then when it comes to parents and grandparents, I heard this from a trial judge recently in a particular case last week, was, you want to get something, honey works better than vinegar. So that's true. I tell grandparents all the time, you want to see your kids, be nice to the parents. Don't say things to because there are cases all around the country. This happens to everybody, right? You tell the grandparents, hey, offer them, would you mind taking care of our Johnny Saturday night? Hubby and I are going to have a romantic weekend together. Grandparents are like, great. And the parents say something like, but be sure don't allow them to eat ice cream after 9 o'clock in the evening. It upsets their stomach or whatever. Or
Well, you know,
please,
you may be undermining Leon's grandparental authority. It works.
or the parents say something like, you know, that R-rated movie that you think is so hilarious and enjoyable, don't let our 10-year-old watch that movie. And too often in our society, grandparents thumb their noses at the boundaries that the parents want to create for their children, similar to what the schools are doing, right? It's our child. We're setting a particular boundary. We ask that you honor and respect it. And as long as you do, we'll get along great. But when the grandparents say, yeah, you told us that, but you know what? We're the grandparents. We can do whatever we want. Well, what's the parent's recourse? It is to say, you did not follow our boundaries, our rules for our children. And the only thing we can do to protect our children, to have them be raised as we believe they should be, is to not allow you to have them anymore. You're welcome to come over and visit with us, come to family dinners, but they're not coming to spend time with you alone, because we know you don't listen to what boundaries we want and rules we want you to follow. But
well,
hey,
I know we're running up against the boundaries on this topic for this time, but Tim and Leon, did you guys want to jump in with a real quick before we move on to the last thing, the Knucklehead Noise Patrol?
No, I'm good. No, I really.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, I'm gonna regret squandering this opportunity to talk. Yeah, doesn't want to talk, but I'm kind of overwhelmed. And so let's go on to the next topic. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, it's funny. We've been talking about a lot of stuff about the schools, a lot of stuff about, you know, things that can be happening at the schools that you may not know about as a parent. And in California, not only are these sort of issues with schools not telling you what's going on, but they're introducing all kinds of other stuff that maybe if you're going to a public school, you really don't have a choice about what the curriculum is there, and you're stuck. And so one of the things that just has been breaking over the last week or so is this woke kindergarten stuff that's happening in a particular school district in California. And, you know, it's with government money being spent here, and it's called woke kindergarten. And it's causing, I guess, they tried this in a school district, and, you know, it'd be one thing if they were getting some positive results, but the grades are going down for students while this is happening. And the school district is kind of calling it a success because I guess it's helping with attendance, but it's still, the grades are continuing to plummet. But one of the crazy things is that the person who is running this whole woke kindergarten, who's being contracted to teach this stuff. Well, she was recently on a video that, you know, and it says woke kindergarten on the video. So it's part of her, you know, business, it sounds like. But and she was having some kind of, you know, extreme opinions is probably the best way to put it. And it kind of makes you wonder if this is working its way into the classroom. And so, James, maybe we could get KNP number 1 real quick.
Yes, everyone, the rumors are true. I am anti-Israel. I am pro-Palestine. And I am 100% 10 toes down anti-Israel. I believe Israel has no right to exist. I believe the United States has no right to exist. I believe every settler colony who has committed genocide against native peoples, against indigenous people, has no right to exist. I believe in a free Palestine. From the river to the
So that was her sort of giving her political views. And, you know, I mean, people have their own political views, but you kind of wonder, is she telling all the kids that the United States shouldn't exist in the classroom? I don't know. But I do have an example of one lesson, and it's a very short video, but it shows what they're teaching. And this apparently is going from all the way from grades, I guess, kindergarten, all the way through 6, I think, because I think it's an elementary school that's getting this stuff. So, James, could you play KMP2 just so we can kind of see what a lesson is like that's being taught on this stuff?
Difference by Key, woke kindergarten. Can you spot the difference? Can you spot the difference? Can you spot the difference?
So if you can't spot the difference, it's almost always a case of white people confronting the police and black people
Can you
being
spot the
confronted in a
difference?
similar situation. So,
Can
take
you
that for
spot
what
the
it's worth.
difference? Can you spot the 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 difference? Now, can you find something that's the same?
So in every case, it was pretty much juxtaposing police encounters with black people versus white people in protests, and somehow bringing up I guess the way they're framing it is that they're treated completely differently is the way they're framing this. We might argue with that, I guess, but it does show that, my gosh, if you're a first grader or second grader, you're kind of being exposed to this stuff. It seems, I guess, school choice, if that's what you want to choose. But this is a government public school, so you don't probably have that much of a choice in going to this particular school. Anyways, you guys want to jump in on this one? It just seems kind of, yet another tale from Bluetopian California.
I want to know whether they say the Pledge of Allegiance at this school.
I bet you they don't. I bet you they don't.
Yeah.
I am sure that video should have said, "Could you spot the sickness?" is what it was intended to say. These people are insane, and these are people teaching our children. Anything with the word woke in it is a danger to our children. We should do something about these people. They are sick.
Yeah, the only comment I guess I would go with, first of all, just age appropriateness. If you took some 16 to 19-year-old or even college students and had a robust discussion and debate, and people could point out, add some facts and information from their reading of news reports, or they're watching videos or having full context, there's probably some lessons and information that could be taught about encounters with law enforcement, unlawfulness, criminal conduct, political points of views, and that there's probably something. But children, without sounding naive about it, I'm a parent. My child's 17, so he's been from, a baby to now. Holy smokes, can we please let kids be kids and have a childhood that's mostly about just playing and fun and learning about nice and happy things, not to insulate them from everything that's negative in the world or not teach them. They're going to learn. Unfortunately, they're going to learn all too quickly about some of the terrible things in our society, historically, currently, and ongoing. I want to be insulated from all of the noise. Golly, come on.
And that exactly that what you are saying, David, is the exact illumination of the problem. These teachers, these public educations, these woke jackasses, pardon my language, have now taken a right upon themselves to educate our children. And I put that word educate in quotes. And what they're educating our children, which is a bunch of garbage. And this is the problem. So yes, we would like to insulate them from all the horrors of the world to some extent. But as long as we have these people who have a monopoly on our children between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to have a real problem with sick people like this woman telling our kids, can you spot a difference, when it should be, can you spot a sickness?
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to jump in with real quick, James, can you bring up the visual? If you want to check this out, they do have, we're not really, cherry picking. That there's a whole bunch of videos like this online. James, can you pull up the visual real quick? It's YouTube's page for Woke Kindergarten. So, if you really want to go see what they're teaching the kids in that school district, you can find these videos. They're there. They put them out there on YouTube. And you can actually, and the crazy thing is, we're not calling them woke; they're calling themselves woke. So, this isn't like we're giving them a derogatory label. That's their self-described name. So,
at the risk of not being invited back, gentlemen, let me add this. if you're a parent and you take your kid to a football game or basketball game or baseball game and you put a jersey on them, a hat on them, and you have them cheer for your favorite sports team, I don't have a problem with that. But guess what? You're indoctrinating and teaching your child to love one team and hate their rival, okay? And it's sports, so we all go, hey, no big deal. I don't want a law, but I'd like all parents to be thinking this. When you observe a kid at a rally or protest, and this includes everybody on the right side of the political spectrum, it includes everybody on every conservative cause as much as everybody on the left. And no matter how right you believe your cause is and position you have as an adult, go do it without dragging your kid along, giving them a sign that they don't even know how to read or what it means, and trying to teach them to hate people on the other side because they have a different point of view. It's just my personal point of view. That's not a ParentsUSA point of view because it's your right to do it, but I think it's unhealthy. We shouldn't see kids at rallies and protests about anything unless you're cheering your team winning the Super Bowl or the NBA championship or something else. And even then recognize you're teaching your kid to hate the other team and everybody that lives in that city just because they live in that city and they like their team. And unfortunately, we're doing that politically and we're doing that on causes. So the pro-life, the anti-abortion, the pro-abortion causes, it always bothers me a little bit, again, regardless of where I stand, which isn't for discussion. It's just about wherever you stand, let that be your cause. Don't take your kid there. If their kid's 14, 15, 16, and they've starting to really see it and understand it and can have a talk about it, they still may not yet have. Keep in mind, insurance companies charge more for insurance up to age 25 because kids lack sufficient judgment to make good decisions. 25. So don't take your 8-year-old anything. Don't take your 5-year-old anything, and quit talking to them about adult issues. Sorry, rant there.
David, there's no risk that we would not invite you back. Okay, there's no risk of that. Okay, don't worry about that. But I would love to further that discussion, especially the analogy you brought up about the kid taking the kid to the baseball game and all that kind of stuff. I would love to talk about that with you on the next time we get you back, because I think there are some real problems in that, quite frankly.
Before we leave, I want to hear if our Screaming Eagle has a bomb he wants to drop on this particular.
Yeah, I was just going to jokingly say that did it, David. You're not coming back. That's it. because
bombed the wrong target.
Well, if the Knuckleheads of Liberty are a constitutional republic, then by a vote of 2-1, I'm probably coming back.
Yes, you are. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about me. But
we will outvote Tim. I can assure you of that.
All right.
But like I said, I would love to discuss that with you.
Okay, let's do it.
Well, hold on. I want to hear, Tim, did you still have something to drop on this?
If I don't say it pretty soon, I'm not going to remember it. Just if I pronounce this wrong, forgive me, but over politicization or anyway, that was what was going on in that other thing with the can you spot the difference? So which is what David was saying essentially. So just too much politics. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. Yeah, it'd be nice to just have kids be kids for a while.
Yeah,
that's and not parts of a protest. Yeah. Well, that said, David, I wanted to give one last shout out to your organization. Maybe we could bring up the visual again. So it's ParentsUSA.org. Did you have any parting shots you wanted to take to let the viewers know about your organization before we wrap?
Well, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. Your donations are tax deductible. Check with your accountant, tax preparer. But that said, we need to have parents backing us, not big corporations, not big rich donors. We just need a lot of parents to say, you know what, I have $5 once a year, $50 once a year, or $8 every now and then, and we'll do fine. Literally, out-of-pocket costs are high enough, and trying to keep up with the volume of parents, because parents around the country are looking for an organization that really, we're not agenda driven. Notice I don't talk about what we're trying to accomplish. Holy smokes, we're just trying to push back against government intruding into what parents want to do for their own children, making their decisions best they can, even if other people don't agree. I mean, my goodness gracious, we don't agree with each other about anything, and that's okay. But when it comes to my child, hey, butt out. When it comes to your child, don't worry. I'm not going to try to tell you what you should or shouldn't do.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us, David. Thank you guys all for being a part of this tonight. And if you're watching out there, we've got other guests lined up coming up over the coming weeks. And, all of them are out there trying to move the ball for liberty. So, if you're watching before the next show, kind of start thinking about what you can do in your community to advance the ball for liberty as well. So we certainly need it. So thanks again so much. And until the next one, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.